Comic books. The very phrase arouses imagery of dashing heroes, bright colors, and cheesy dialogue. But throughout the 80s and 90s, comic books grew up. They became more vulgar, violent, and bloody. Stories were gritty and not shy to show sex or drugs. Even early comic book classics like Batman and Superman were getting dark and vicious makeovers during this time. Enter Frank Miller's Sin City, and comic books were not necessarily things that little kids picked up at the supermarket. The atmosphere is dark, the stories are tough and brutal, the dialogue and characters are intricate and memorable, and the pages are almost completely devoid of color, with a few exceptions. Miller pushed the envelope on what a comic book could be, developing his own gritty universe of film noir style thrillers, and 4 of his stories would go on to be adapted into the 2005 film Sin City. A while back, I did a review on this film, and to this day, I credit it as being the perfect comic book movie. It's stylistically brilliant, thoroughly intense and exciting, and almost every panel and word bubble is brought to life on the big screen. Needless to say, Sin City delivered a huge impact, and for quite some time, a sequel had been in the works. Well, finally, nearly a decade after its predecessor's release, Sin City: A Dame to Kill For has hit theaters. But was it worth the wait? Let's find out. Miller once again writes and co-directs with Robert Rodriguez. The film follows the same episodic format its predecessor did, this time being based off the comics Just Another Saturday Night and the titular A Dame to Kill For, as well as including 2 original stories entitled The Long Bad Night and Nancy's Revenge. Just Another Saturday Night follows brutish thug Marv as he wakes up in the projects amongst several dead guys, without remembering how he got there. The Long Bad Night follows a cocky gambler named Johnny, who makes the mistake of winning poker against the corrupt Senator Rourke. A Dame to Kill For follows the repressed psychotic Dwight McCarthy, as he is trapped in a web of lies spun by a former lover named Ava. And finally, Nancy's Revenge tells the story of the traumatized stripper Nancy Callahan, who swears to avenge the death of her savior, Detective John Hartigan. Well, that was a mouthful, but that's the story. Or stories, as it were. Now, a bit of a warning. During this review, I expect a lot of viewers to be fans of the first film or the comics, curious to know if this film is worth seeing, so you can expect a lot of allusions to them. I apologize if I confuse the casual viewers, but I highly recommend seeing the first film before this one anyway. As stated earlier, Rodriguez has returned to co-direct this picture, and it's just as gloriously sleek as the first film. The extravagant sets, the effective homages to the comics, and the clever editing are all a treat to behold. There's nothing more satisfying than seeing a shot resemble a panel from the comic perfectly, and the use of white blood is always going to be cool. The black and white scenery is often coupled with clever uses of color, but this is a strange gripe I have with the film. I feel it uses too much color. Now, granted, the first film used a splash of color here and there to enunciate a point, but I feel there was too much in here. Neon signs, explosions, and even the redundancy of 2 colorized blonde chicks. I think less is more in the case of Sin City, and I think the first film handled the use of color much better. But this is a tad nitpicky, so let's move on. The acting in this film is fantastic, creating a great balance of comic book dramatics and film noir grit. A good portion of the cast returns to their roles and slip back in perfectly. Mickey Rourke is once again 100% badass as Marv. Powers Booth is just as twisted and evil as Senator Rourke. Rosario Dawson is just as sexy and dangerous as Gale. And Bruce Willis is just as brooding as the hallucination of John Hartigan. Jessica Alba ups the ante as the new and dark Nancy Callahan and truly delivers a compelling performance. Josh Brolin plays Dwight McCarthy before his plastic surgery, which would make him look like Clive Owen in Sin City 1. He's super cool and tough in the part, and I thoroughly enjoyed his performance. It would have been nice to see Owen return as post-surgery Dwight, but for whatever reason, he couldn't return. I just wish they tried to make Brolin actually look like a different person instead of just looking like he's wearing a wig. Dennis Haysbert plays Manute, the role originally played by Michael Clark Duncan, the hulking bodyguard of Ava Lord, who is played by the smoking hot Eva Green. Both these performances are great, but I feel like Green couldn't decide on what accent she wanted to use. Sometimes she sounds posh East Coast, and other times she sounds like a Hepburn. Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays Johnny, and he does a great job too, being a welcome addition to the Sin City mythos. Now, the cast and direction is fantastic, but unfortunately, the rest of the film is kind of a mixed bag. You can tell Rodriguez and Miller were desperately trying to recapture the same genius of the first film. The use of Just Another Saturday Night as the film's intro is genius and really gets you hyped to return to the city. A Dame to Kill For is brilliant, being incredibly faithful to the comic and being very well written, with great action sequences and tons of stylistic memorability. Also loads of naked Eva Green. But I have very mixed feelings about the two original stories. It's not like they're bad stories or uninteresting, they just feel standard. The character of Johnny is very suave and memorable, but the story The Long Bad Night doesn't really amount to a whole lot in the long run, and I failed to see the purpose when it was all said and done. Nancy's Revenge is well done and very intense, however, it's near impossible to fit it into the Sin City timeline canonically speaking, and it's a very basic revenge story. The Sin City story, The Hard Goodbye, is a revenge story, but has a lot more meat to the action and the story as a whole. The two original stories just felt, for lack of a better term, half-assed, and really makes the movie feel lopsided and kind of forced. So was Sin City: A Dame to Kill For worth the wait? Well, in a way, yes. It recalls why the first film was so important for the comic book film industry, and is injected with super cool stylized action, a stellar soundtrack, and fantastic characters. It is a little middling at some points, and you feel like it's trying too hard, but it's almost forgivable because the first film was such a tough act to follow. I'm not disappointed I saw it, but it certainly won't please everyone. I give Sin City: A Dame to Kill For 3.5 infuriating political and moral injustices out of 5. It's good, but maybe not as good as we would have hoped.